Hello, and welcome to the CppCon 2020 Organizers Panel. A different experience for us, but it's not new for CppCon to be supporting local user groups, other conferences. We have always felt like that we're in a community, and we've always tried to support other events, support people who go to other events, and we've been really grateful because we've gotten that support in return. And one of the things I want to let everybody know about, if Jim could paste the URL to Jens's talk last year. He did a talk on starting local group organizations and things like that. So for people who are interested in that, check that out. We also have a starter group, a starter kit for if you are planning to start a local group. I don't think we've really updated that for how to do this in COVID. So it's kind of a, read this over in preparation for how to start a group in the local world. Actually, there's a lot of stuff that would be relative, even if you wanted to start a purely online group. Some of the stuff would still be relevant. But I wanted to have Jim also paste that into the chat for people to look at that. All right, so I want to introduce our panel, and I'm going to start with Harald. Harald, do you want to tell us where you're from and what you're doing there?
Yes, I'm Harald. I'm actually from Austria, but I live in Stockholm, Sweden. 4 years ago, a little bit more than 4 years ago, we had no C++ user group, and I wanted to have one. So actually, I stepped in and created one. And back in the days, it was Sweden CPP, because it was the only user group in Sweden. Today, we have one in Göteborg or Gothenburg, and one in Malmö also, and there is one in Linköping, which would need a new organizer, but yeah, that's the situation.
So since,
yeah.
I was just going to ask you one question about those other groups. Did they happen because you started the one you did, or were they just entirely coincidental? Or
well, actually, I'm also the organizer from Göteborg, so I kicked off this because they had none. And there was an inactive group. They had no meetings. So I took over the group, and then I asked, hey, who wants to take over this? And then talk with people in Göteborg, and I've also been there. And in Malmö, this happened. They just asked, hey, how do I start a user group? And I said, well, just start one.
Okay. And Jens, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us all the things that you're active with?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Jens Wöller. I run Meetingcpp, and around 2012, I was in a similar situation as Harald was, but for Germany and Europe. So I started a conference, and through this conference, just like CppCon, I started motivating people to get user groups running in their areas. And since then, Meetingcpp is an organization dedicated to organizing and helping other organizers user groups, and the newest endeavor for this since this year's that I've also started an online user group, which you can find the details under online.meetingcpp.com, which is basically, I had a user group in Düsseldorf for very long, but then I did not have enough folks that would probably follow into the online setting to make it a local meeting. So I decided to take a general approach and make an online user group.
Well, we're definitely going to be talking a lot about online stuff in this panel. But I want to introduce Inbal. Inbal, you want to tell us where you're from and what you're doing?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you, John. So my name is Inbal Levi. I'm from Israel, and I've joined the organization of Core CPP, both conference and user group. So I would say that the person who actually started our user group, the Israeli user group, is Adi Shavit and Michael. I think Michael also was involved very, very early in the beginning. But I will say that I think we really increased our outreach to the international world, and we're actually been joining ESO, and now we're really trying to have more of our local users to approach international conferences, and of course to have talks in international conferences. I'm very happy to be here today.
So I think one of the interesting things to learn from that is that creating the local user group actually caused people who were there to think more internationally. Because as you've said, there's now the ISO Israel didn't exist, and it came largely out of the user group stuff. So that's a real tribute. It's not just people getting together and ignoring the rest of the world. In fact, it's the exact opposite of that. As we get together, we think about those kinds of things. So I want to talk to Michael. You want to introduce yourself, Mike, and say what you're doing up there? Up there.
Up here. Thank you, John. My name is Michael Daum. I live in Toronto, Ontario. And my day job is I run a team called Geometry Modeling at Epic Games. And I'm also the organizer, I'm a co-organizer and founder of the CppTO, which is the Toronto C++ user group. And either 2021 or 2022, we will also have a C++ conference here in Toronto, which we're going to call CPP North. But pandemic pending, we'll see what happens.
All right. Marco, you want to let us know where you're from and what you're doing there?
Yeah, thank you, John. My name is Marco Arena. I'm from Italy, and I work at Tetra Pak as an AI software engineer, and I've been leading the Italian C++ community since 2013. So I run events like Italian C++ Conference and C++ Day that maybe you heard about, also local meetups. And actually, I consider the community as a way to express myself. So I don't stop with C++ communities, but I also lead other two user groups. One is Coding Gym, and another one is Machine Learning Modena, recently founded. And thank you for inviting me here. I'm very happy to share my experience.
Well, we have on this panel a lot of experience, a lot of different experience and different point of view, but we don't have a lot of questions posted yet. So I'm going to be monitoring the questions, and I really invite you to do that. But since there's no questions, I get, moderator prerogative. I get to start asking all the questions, right? And I think it's fair probably to start with Jens, because he's the dates back furthest of those on the panel for being involved. What's the impact then of COVID? I mean, this is hitting us all, and I think it's the obvious question to talk about all of us. But what's your point of view on it, and how has it made your situation worse, and how has it strengthened it?
Well, it more or less stopped our Zoom meetings, and for the conference, it's for a long time it's like totally unclear, and it's still kind of unclear. I'm very happy that CppCon is working well, and that we are seeing the whole platform which we use and which we will share with CppCon working and keeping up to the stresses, like the first time where we see so many attendees in the software, and that it's actually being understood and used by the C++ community. I think that the full fallout of COVID will show itself next year. Not so much this year. This year is still we are coming from the happy times. I think it will have definitely some impact on conferences and user groups, and that's why I think it's really valuable to experiment in the virtual field and have virtual meetings, and that's also why I definitely started to go in this field, right? Because that's where I partly see this decade, the change I see where we're coming from. The last 7 years, what we built, and John and I know kind of in 2012, where CppCon didn't exist and was not even as an idea existing, and Meeting C++ starting, and John being supportive of that, and then slowly the conference scene growing. But now I think it's a certain situation that I hope has its positive that we are able to reach more people online through this.
Right. I think there's a lot of upside. But before we get into that, I do want to get it. We do have a question, and this is from Gabriel, who knows the answer to the question, but it's raising a great point. His question is, how hardcore of a C++ expert must you be to create a new user group? And who wants to take that one on?
I don't think you need to be hardcore at all. What you need is you need the ability to at least appear outgoing. You need you need to be willing to work really hard, and you need to love the C++ community, especially your local C++ community, and want to build it. But nobody's expecting you to be the expert. You go find experts. And to be honest, some of the best content is not even by experts, because content which engages a broad group of people is not necessarily the most advanced content.
That's right. I think it's interesting the way you started that, Michael, because it's like you don't actually need to be friendly. You just need to appear friendly. I think there's a great truth to that. But I think that's an excellent answer. And I would build on that and say also that you will learn about C++. You'll become more of an expert because you'll be talking to people with a number of different points of view who explain why they're interested in certain things, and you'll begin to realize a lot of interconnections and those kinds of things. So you will become more of a C++ expert, and you will certainly appear more of one. It'll be easier for you to get hired if you say, well, how's your C++ skills? Well, I run the local C++ group. Oh, well, we don't have to talk about it then. We just assume you're a genius. Jens, did you have a comment?
I think you will get to know your local C++ experts. If you run the group, you will get to talk to a lot of people, and you will find out that some of them think that they're experts, and the more you progress to become an expert, the less you think that you are one.
That's right. You'll not only learn who in your area is quite knowledgeable, you also learn who's very good at explaining concepts and good at presenting.
And I would love to add, I just would love to add that I think no one is an expert in everything necessarily, and everyone in every level have more to learn from other people. So just by having the community, you're increasing everyone's benefits. You just need the passion for it. I don't think that's necessarily the technical part is the.
If I can add one simple thought is I've been developing this thought in the last few years. I think that the role of a community manager is very similar to the role of a gardener that looks after a garden, because actually you cannot really influence the nature, because you have just to create the good conditions for a natural process to just work. And that's not very easy. I mean, because sometimes you have to leave the stage, let's say. So the community is not centered around you, that is the community manager, but the community is the bunch of people attending and interacting in a natural way. Right. So that's something maybe we can discuss about later, but the spontaneity of the interactions with this COVID emergency, in my opinion, have been lost a bit. And so that's the message is don't be afraid of being an expert to run a user group, but just think about creating the right conditions for let the group grow from itself.
That concept of creating the right conditions kind of feeds into our next question, which is from Attila, who says, in C++, we have strong personalities, very strongly held opinions, diverse attitudes. Some people are shy, others outspoken. What are the tools to herd the cats and make a smooth and friendly experience? I don't know if it's actually true. I haven't really run anybody in the C++ community that had strongly held opinions. But if I ever do, I'll be sure and let you know. So does anybody want to share any particular insights as how we herd cats?
I would love to. I don't know if herd is the right phrase for that, but I would love to say that on one hand, I mean, clearly I'm a technical person and I really care about the details, and that's probably one of the reasons that I'm on ISO. But I really think that you just need to in a way, you just need to lead it, the attitude, the way you think that is the right way to do it. Like if someone approaches you and you talk with him and you're not, I would hope that I'm able to create this atmosphere just by having, a personal example. and just by
be friendly.
Exactly. just be friendly. Just be friendly and make sure that people aren't being feel comfortable. So create atmosphere by just doing that yourself.
Right. Set the example. Try to be engaging. Try to be understanding of other people's strongly held opinions. Those kinds of things. Yeah. Right. So Anchor says, well, this is a cliche, but I have to ask, what are some of the do's and don'ts when operating a user group? I don't think we want to go through a whole list because we've only got an hour, but any high points of things that you learned the hard way, oh, that seemed like a good idea, but now I regret having done it, or watch somebody else make the mistake? Or is there anything that you guys learned that wasn't obvious, but now you realize, wow, that's the key. That's what we should be doing. Any thoughts on that?
Well,
yeah,
if I can say something about the dose. The dose is, one point is collecting feedback all the time. I was discussing this with a couple of people yesterday during the networking. It's very important to collect feedback of your people attending the meetups or the events, and also adapt along the way according to the feedback when the feedback makes sense. You can also run some roundtables, maybe with a few people from the user group, so not from the staff, but from the user group, for collect new ideas and new concepts to implement, to develop for the incoming event. The first few meetups I organized, I didn't actually collect feedback, and this was an error for me. When I started collecting feedback, things really started getting better for me.
Are you talking about formal, asking people to fill out paper, or
yes,
online?
Feedback is, for example, the surveys that you run at the end of each day of CppCon. So you reach people via email and ask to fill a form with some predefined questions, and also with free text. Opening questions, stuff like that. Also asking feedback during the event, where go through the people, speak with people. I know the organizer work is really tough, so it's hard during the day, but it's really important. And John, yesterday you said something in our discussion, that when you go through people in an in-person event, you can realize the feeling just by chatting with people. That's really important. That's why, for example, I miss all the talks during my conferences, because I have to go through the expo room. I have to go to reach people. So it's very tough, but in my opinion, it gives you lots of satisfactions at the end.
So my quick plug is, if you haven't done your surveys, please do your surveys. You understand how important they are to the organizing the event. Anybody else have a particular do or don't?
I would like to add to the feedback. It's important, but don't be disappointed if it's not as you expect it to be, because you need also to be able to take feedback that is not as nice as you want. So
I've never had anything like that, but I can see how you'd want to represent. Yes. So Jim, can you paste in the starter kit URL in the chat channel? So for those of you who are watching, this is the URL for our starter kit, and what this is it's not really polished, but it's just a lot of different information about how to start a local user group. And I think Jim's going to paste that into the chat so that you can copy it rather than having to write it down. So there's another question from John. In your user groups, how many attendees / members are people who use C++ professionally for their day jobs versus people who use it or are simply curious about it? Anybody have a particular insight on that?
We're making, in the beginning of our meetups, we're making a survey usually, and we're asking people those questions. And this is changing a lot. It could be from 70% people that are professional in doing C++ in their everyday job, and it could be that 50% are doing that as a side project. It could also be the groups aren't necessarily. There could be people that are in both groups that have both side project and also do something different in C++ in the workplace. So this is really changing even from one meetup to another.
Do you mean the numbers change, or you just mean there's a wide variety? The numbers change. Sometimes it's a lot of, and there's no particular pattern. Is it because of the speaker, or?
I mean, I haven't recognized any particular pattern yet, but clearly it will have something to do with the topic. I would imagine, but because we're also trying to engage people by having sort of a version for the lightning talk. In the virtual environment and both in the real world. So I think that people also come just to, show their projects, show their interests and neat features that they found. So it could really change also by this, whoever comes.
Did somebody else have their hand up? Did somebody else want to make a comment? Michael, yeah.
To me, I think that it's I think our group is quite mixed. And there's also another group of people who were using C++ professionally and want to get back to it. There seems to be a surprising number of those. But it ties also into something I was thinking about with the last question of do's and don'ts, which is a surprising don't, which is don't curate your content overly. It's very tempting, especially at the very beginning of the group, to just go for the talks that would be the most interesting CPP talks to you, and cutting edge, big name speaker. There's going to be a meetup every month. You're going to be doing this ongoing. Just try stuff, and you never know until you try it whether it's going to be a success or not, because you don't know what mix this day will be of experts and professionals, and even among professionals, it's a pretty broad community.
Right.
So just try stuff, and that's how you're going to learn about the mix of people and engage different parts of your local community.
Okay, Jens. I'm not hearing you, Jens.
So there's a fair share of folks coming to user groups which don't or used to work with C++. Actually, if you could put I shared a screen with you internally. If you can put that in the stream, I would show you. I asked a similar question on my community survey, and so from the community we reach. Most people work in some way with C++, but at the user groups there is a certain share of folks coming for the reason of having this as an interest or wanting to go back into the industry.
Can you show that, Jim?
So, yeah, they exist. But in the overall community which we reach for CppCon, and it's overwhelmingly people which really use C++
No, the desktop.
day.
Jens's desktop. Sorry, Jim.
Right. That's from my community survey. And you see like large majority is, using it daily or using it often, and depends on your definition of often, I guess. And then there's, of course, a few people which, use it rarely or not anymore. But also there's like a strong bias towards taking a C++ survey, I guess, is using C++. So
thank you, Jim. So yeah, I think I know in the local group that I've been active in, I do feel like a lot of times there's a lot of people who are really at the very beginner, and we don't really cater well to that. But I mean, we're not going to shun people or anything like that. But I do think we have a typical talk about what are the new features of C++20 or a talk like that, and the new people are like, wow. So that's tough, but you got to find your way, and part of it I think is kind of what Michael said. Don't over curate. If you've got a good talk that's coming up and it's a little bit expert, just make sure you're describing it properly and go ahead and let them do that. And then later on, you'll have a talk that's a little more beginner. And again, there might be the experts who say, I really don't need a review of how to do that, and they won't come. But if you're honest about what the talks are, I think a variety is key. It'll build a community. All right, so we have another question. Could you all present some of the out-of-box and highly engaging activities you've held in your user group? So I think this is one of the challenges of any user group that's trying to do something regularly, which is that we don't all happen to have, Scott Myers isn't the local guy who can just drop by every month and give us a kick-ass talk. So some of us are better off in that situation than others are. But I think almost all organizers at some point are saying, oh gosh, what are we going to do this month? And so what ideas do you have other than just let's hope there's a great speaker who happens to show up at our doorstep? What can you do to create some out of the box, something interesting that isn't just relying on a great speaker? Yeah, Marco.
I can say something that is linked to the next questions as well about having some lab sessions. One of the user groups I run called Coding Gym, it's only based on coding laboratories where people basically paid program. So they work together on some problems that we set. And so they can use any language they want. So this is not primarily focusing on C++, but obviously many people use C++, but others learn other programming languages. So they use other languages like Python, C# and JavaScript. And it's very interesting because, people are free to do whatever they want. So they can use any patterns they want. They can use functional programming or object-oriented programming, anything. And the problem is self-contained. Is very, let's say, quick to do, quick to solve. Is half an hour time. So that's, I think it's interesting. At the end of each problem, we have a retrospective. So people can come up on stage and present their solutions, their approaches. But the session is quite small, so it's not intimidating for people. So it's not 100 people, it's 20 people. So it's very informal. It's like being, with friends. And so this way people also can learn how to speak in public. So this is also an informal way, to approach to open discussions and not being afraid of a rich amount of people, a big amount of people. So that's something interesting you can try with your own user groups, especially for C++. You can experiment with ranges. I've blogged about some exercises. In codinggym.org, we have tons of exercises you can use. If you want, I can send you the links. And feel free to reach out if in case you want to try something. That's one contribution I feel to.
So anybody have any other suggestions about kind of just add content?
You don't always need a stage. It's like really important when you work with a group that sometimes just people want to be on the same level. So in the last years, what I've done in the months where I run my conference, when we usually don't find a speaker and I don't want to speak, it's like the other side. If you're an organizer, you often get to do talks. If there's nobody else talking, then it's you kind of doing the content. But what I found out is like a really great way to get any debate started and just give folks a great evening to talk and to exchange what they know about C++, is to have an evening like a book club where some people bring their books, which they about C++, and you start talking like that. And this is just the beginning, and then you naturally have a group talking about either the books, and then you get into Scott Meyer's book, and this is a certain topic, or you get the move semantics and the debate about that. And so it naturally moves on all evening, and maybe also splits up into different groups because some people want to talk about Qt or this book and that book. But it's a great way to have some form of content which speaks to a lot of folks which might not want to just consume talks, or which does not bring you as an organizer to have a lot of organizing to do.
So anybody else have particular ideas? I want to throw in, if you go to the pub quiz tonight, that would be something that you could do that would be extremely popular. And I also know just one other idea real quick. We had a session where we just said, hey, come with your stories about interviewing and being interviewed. And we just shared, good techniques for doing interviewing and horror stories about the worst interviews you've ever had. Harald, did you have something you want to say?
Yes, just I wanted to add, just especially when you want to start a user group or you start a user group, you don't have to start with conference-like evenings with a speaker and so on. It's totally okay. Just meet in a cafe. If you meet 5 to 10 people and you just talk, then things will develop. So that's totally fine. And then you can also find ideas and possibilities in a cafe.
Right. Yeah, Michael.
Two notes. One, we did a pub quiz, and I know I'm a broken record. One tricky part of the quiz is figuring out how hard to make the questions. So people are in teams. Our questions ended up being a little too hard. So there was a group of people who really loved the pub quiz, and there was a group of people who sat at the table and were just like, and even the team part didn't fix it completely because they are silent at their table. So you have to put a mix of questions too. The other thing is with these alternative types of programming, lightning talks, show and tell, pub quiz, even just the get together that Harald is mentioning, you have to have a plan. Even if your plan is to have some unscripted time, don't think that you can start the meeting and just this part's just going to work itself out. Nothing will ever just work itself out. So plan how long, plan what the segments are, what things are going to do, what's going to happen if it goes well, what's going to happen if it doesn't go well. You just have to know in your mind how that's going to go.
Did you start to say something, Inbal?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say, in a bit of a different perspective, I would also suggest to try to pull more people that aren't usually in your user group. For example, we're trying to have more teens to speak about their projects in our group, and before the pandemic, our group have met in basically in a college, and having students coming over and giving their short talks, and you'll be surprised how continent that adds to your user group just by having people with a bit of different people that aren't the usual audience.
Okay, thank you. So I think this next question we did discuss, as Marco said, he was talking about the lab sessions. And Attila actually followed that up. He's saying not scripted labs where people do something new like hackathons. And I think that's kind of what Marco was saying, is giving people the opportunity to explore problems and find their own solutions and find out how that works. So I think we've talked about that. The next question is not a question. I think it's a friend of Michael's who's saying kudos to Michael. He used the online thing to hold joint Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Vancouver user group meetings. So this is Canada's a big country with a lot of time zones. And so you want to mention a little bit about what you've done there and how successful that is? And is that a model for other organizations?
Yeah, I think it should be. It's been it's been a lot of fun. It's been really successful for us. I think we might have had one or maybe just two online sessions that were just Toronto. And I knew Montreal had a UG, so I reached out to them. And then Puya started a Vancouver UG, so we reached out to him. So we started having joint online events. And we each post an event on our Meetup to correspond, because on Meetup you have to be a member of the group to join. So, and we would just collaborate in that way. It's been absolutely fantastic. Since then, Ottawa resurrected their community and joined in on them, and Edmonton started a new user group. So now we're running pretty much monthly events with the 5 Canadian groups. And I think time zones do come in for Edmonton and Vancouver. Those people have to take time out of their day, because we usually are doing it. The biggest 3 groups are in the East Coast. So we schedule it at 6:30, and so it's a bit earlier for the Vancouver, but people still come.
Well, if people are working at home, usually that's not as big a deal.
Right.
If they were commuting home, it's harder for them to. We really don't encourage people to drive and go to user group meetings at the same time. You should drive to your user group meeting when that's possible. But anyway,
totally agree.
Yeah. Okay. And I will say what we did in the Bay Area, because we also had kind of, there's something going on in the South Bay, something going on in the city. And what we actually did was we combined them as a single meetup group. So the meetup.com, about because it's basically now, of course, we haven't really done much literally in months because of COVID. But when we were actively meeting, essentially the different groups were pretty much independent. In other words, the San Francisco group was doing its own programming and they were meeting once a month. but it went to the same meetup. So if you were in the Bay Area anywhere, you would see all the meetups, and you might just decide, well, I'm not going to drive into the city, but if there was a particularly good speaker, then I would. And so it really helped out a lot, and it made it, it feels more like one group, even though, as I said, it's really kind of run as if they're independent groups. There's someone who's in charge of lining up speakers for that session and talking to the hosts and doing all that kind of stuff. And it makes it easier. But for a population as large as the Bay Area, it does actually make sense to have essentially what were almost weekly meetings. But we just didn't have everybody going to all of them. But anyway, have any of you considered whether Remo can help improve the online version of your local meetings compared to Zoom, Google Hangouts, etc.? So yeah, let's talk a little bit about what we're doing online now, what kind of software we're using, how is this working, how is this different? One of the things, a comment I was making earlier to someone else was, I was kind of wondering if over time what we're going to see. Right now, user groups are local because you get together and see each other local. But if you're doing it online, I was wondering if we would see local user groups instead of being about geography, but instead being on interest. In other words, a game developer group or a science group or a financial group or that kind of thing. I don't think that's really happened yet, but maybe, as Jens said, it'll be next year before we really see the effects of COVID. But if we have lots of online groups, I think we're going to be more likely to be, might have just a beginner group where we just focus on getting people up to where they go to some other group, right? But anybody want to talk about the software you're using and how that's worked and what's good and what's not good? And
well, I can share my. Oh, sorry, Jens, if you want to.
Go ahead, Jens.
I can share my experience with the Italian C++ conference a few months ago. For the talks, I think we opted all for the same solution. We used StreamYard and YouTube. As I basically discussed this with Jens and Phil Nash, and they recommended also to use StreamYard. So we tried it, and we bought two licenses to overcome the limits of the free edition, and it worked well. What's missing is the the interaction with people. We only use the live chat. Was okay, but can be better. For the networking, at the time we used Discord. So we had a Discord server with several rooms and several channels. A channel for each sponsor, a channel for each community, and stuff like that. It didn't work so well, actually. I mean, we had not so much interaction. I think Remo is much better. Is also the structure and the integration. Everything is here in Remo. So you actually don't need to leave the platform, and you don't have to jump out to go to YouTube. And I mean, I'm attending the conference this way. I think it works very, very nice. The only problem, I think, is a bit expensive. So we are discussing with also other people to join, let's say, together and have a common license. We dropped an email to Herb Sutter for the license because we run free events. So our events are all free. So we don't have a ticket price. So we can have maybe a license for all these kind of things, free events. And so yeah, I've been streaming meetups since 2018. So I was kind of prepared to switch totally online. I was using Hangout and YouTube. So basically, we live streamed the Hangout call with the speaker by using OBS. Now we are using StreamYard because it's much simpler. But obviously, we missed the networking part for the local meetups. And what I'm thinking about is organizing a dinner sometimes, let's say every 2 months, if it's feasible. It depends on the curve of contagious. So that's it. But anyway, I think Remo is fantastic. I think is wonderful.
Yeah, just to clarify, if you're interested in using Remo for your event, whether it's just a local meeting or if you actually want to do a conference, whether a day-long conference or a longer conference, contact Phil because he's the one that's kind of coordinating. But the foundation is going to keep a Remo license that if you aren't charging, we're essentially going to let you use that. If it's for a C++ event, we will let you use that. And if you are charging, then we'll expect you to pay in some way. But you talk to Phil about that and Phil Nash.
Yeah, I'll do.
And we can we can work that out. Yeah, Jens, thanks.
So just like John, Phil, I did my research on platforms. So the biggest problem we have with the online platforms is that most of them are built for lead generation and marketing, and they are quite expensive and prohibitive. And they are not built like Remo around having a conversation and having those little video chat rooms, these tables which we sit on. Remo is not perfect, but it's the best solution. I found another platform which is close to it, and maybe one could talk to them that they get the other part of the features which we would need in that platform. Then the only problem is that they charge by time and attendee. So for every attendee, you pay a setup cost and you pay an hourly cost. And that is, in the situation we can host conferences in such a setting, but we're not able to host and bring the community into user groups. And the other point why I decided to kind of do the concept of Meetingcpp Online is just to give the community a chance to get used to the platform. And even if we would have alternatives, I think that like being on one platform has its advantages, so that you need one account once and can join other events. So if you attended CppCon, you can also go to other conferences or attend other user groups, and not need to learn every time a new platform which is being used for this. And on the other hand, we have to see if Remo stays around for this. I think it's like first license is like 1 year. So we'll see some movement in the whole market of, and I guess there's enough software developers listening, web-based platform where you can have video chat rooms and some way to navigate between them in a nice form, easy to host and easy to use, is something which we would definitely probably like using for the rest of the decade. And there definitely is some funding through the conferences for this. So for the moment it's Remo, but it doesn't have to stay Remo. That's what I basically say. But for now, Remo is really good, and you have to beat Remo. And that's hard to do, in my opinion.
So we may have so Jim Roper is letting us know that he and Phil have been working on an idea to kind of build out their own platform. And Jim is the technical magician that's working behind the scenes to make sure all the StreamYard and Remo streams are working for us here at the conference. So I know this isn't news to me. I knew that Jim and Phil were working on this, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing where this ends up, because they are definitely the people who understand both the technology and the demands of somebody running a conference. So it sounds like it would be really cool. In the meantime, of course, we are looking at the existing online solutions. Does anybody else want to talk about success or lack of success that they've had with things?
Well, when it comes to online, I can say we decided to do not something, or I decided to do not something, because I didn't know which platform to use, and I had no motivation to learn all the stuff. So what I actually did was forwarding the people to existing events from others, because today you can join events all around the world, basically, which is good. But they will never be a full replacement for physical events also. So there are people that see online stuff strictly as an asynchronous task. They do it whenever they want. They want to break. They want to go back and forth in talks. And on the other hand, there are people that will never go to a location they don't know, to people they don't know. So it will be interesting how this will develop in future. I mean, maybe some kind of future will be streaming the talks or the sessions out in some way, but I don't know how to include people into discussion and then make the physical feeling available.
So I will share my my personal point of view here. This has been an extremely difficult year for me, trying to figure out. I love the in-person conference. This is something that I've worked an awful lot at, and I'm seeing head nods on the panel. I think we all believe in getting people together in the same room. There's magic that happens there. You know, it's the magic of the conference, as I've said many times, it's not just the content. I mean, that's an important part. It's a bit of a gravity that pulls people together. But the real value of the conference is the discussions with the people there. And they're not always planned. They're not always laid out and said, oh, you know what? I really want to talk to Marco about this particular topic, and I'm going to grab him for what? No, it's the accidental thing of who you happen to be sitting at the table with, who you happen to go to dinner with, who you happen to be standing next to in the break line. Those are just magical things that's what's the thing of the conference. It's hard to tell people that. You have to have experienced it a few times. You can't market it that way. You can't say, you want to come to this conference because you're going to stand in the line and you're going to run into somebody whose name you don't know, who don't have particularly great credentials, but you're going to realize they have incredible insights that are going to make a difference in the way you write code. That's hard to tell people that that's the magic of the conference. But on the other hand, people will tell you that. You know, I went to this conference and I met these people and it was like, wow. And I'm excited about that. And so that's what we all want, to get back to that. But I would say that as painful as this year has been, putting together this conference has made me think more about, well, what exactly is a conference for? Why do we do this? What's the value of it? How do we capture that value in a way that if we can't be face-to-face, we can still have the value, can still create that thing. I'd like to think we've had some success at that, but I think we can do better. And what's opened my eyes about it is that I think that can be part of an experience that is based on and focused on when we get back together where we can do things face-to-face, but having a dimension that says, well, there are people who will never be able to travel for whatever reason, and they want to participate too. They're part of our community. They might be presenters, but they certainly can also be contributing in other ways. And how do we create an event that takes advantage of everything you can do in the face-to-face world, but also has a dimension where people who aren't face-to-face can also participate and contribute? And I don't know the full answer to that, but I know that it's worth figuring out what the answer is. And that's that's the path I've set for myself, is to figure this out. That doesn't mean I'm not, praying for the day when we return to normal again as quickly as possible and can meet, but it's going to change the way I think about user group events and conferences forever, that there can and should be a dimension that is not at the physical space. Now, that may be, as they say, that may be the gravity that pulls everybody together, because everybody wants to see and hear, the big name speakers and the not so big name speakers, because they know that there's a lot there. But what happens is what you really want is you want to talk to the other people who are excited about those same talks. That's what you really want. You want to be with the people who are attracted to the same thing. And I think that we need to figure out, and we have already some, and I think we can do much better. And I think part of that is that the software's got to improve, and we've got to figure out how to use it better. Yeah, Jens? Did you want to say something, Jens? I'm not hearing you.
Gotta unmute myself. Welcome to the virtual world. I would have run a virtual event this year, which is also a local event. So I'm going hybrid this year. But I have come to the conclusion for myself that I don't want to do this as a new normal, to offer like a live stream from a conference or something. For the reason that the AV setup for this is kind of expensive. And if I already see people complaining about prices, there's no way to justify those prices. And I would have like 1,000 tickets or more being sold to recoup the costs for that. I think that online events offer a certain opportunity, and we still are at the beginning and finding out which formats are working, and maybe it's not only talks. And I think for Meetingcpp, I have decided that I'm going to split this. We're going to have the online conference, which is one day, first time next week. And then we're going to have also an online version of this year's Meetingcpp conference, because it's 2020, and likely next year we'll just have a normal conference, because I don't want to run a show locally and have in parallel some other show on the internet where we have to watch up that the lines are staying online and the stream is online and the sound and all that. Because if you want to do that in the needed quality, coming from a conference, it has to come through cameras, it has to come through mix and all the technique behind it. And that has to be professional, and that's very expensive.
Right. Inbal?
I just wanted to add like the optimistic view and to say two things. One is that clearly this pandemic is something worldwide, and therefore I expect us to have solutions in the near future. I mean, what I'm saying is that not only CppCon conferences are, dealing with these issues. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of new platforms, and I'm hoping that they'll be able to combine the good of Remo and other platforms as well. And the second thing I wanted to say is that we do have this debate regarding the localized versus virtual. And in our among us, the organizers of Core CPP regarding the conference. And me personally, I actually want to take the other side and say that I think I would love to have the virtual part also exists in the following years, because I think one thing is that it makes the conference much more inclusive. And for people that, for example, I'm from Israel, and of course CppCon is in USA, and just to arrive for people that you want to join, it's $1,000 just for the flight and additions for the hotels, etc. And I'm actually thinking about people like students that not necessarily already working in the industry. And that's why it's very important to me to actually do have, I would hope that in general, us as a society would be able to have more inclusiveness to eliminate the location factor from this limitation. And of course, I'm acknowledging the localized, the ability to talk with people, and it's really something that is irreplaceable. But I would love to see that there is some kind of a way to combine those. I'm thinking about it as well for our conference, and in general, I would love to see that in the following years we'll be able to have, students from India that otherwise would never be able to come to Israel joining or other.
Yeah, one of the things that we've definitely noticed about this year is that the percent of attendees that are students is way higher. And of course, the student pricing is really discounted compared to others in both scenarios, whether we're on site or whether we're online. And in fact, maybe even more discounted for the on-site. But the problem is that the real expenses, even if you didn't pay for the conference at all, the real expenses are getting there and staying there. And that's just, exactly. Unless you happen to live in the Denver area, that's not necessarily inexpensive. And there's also another dimension to that. And Gabriel's putting this up. He's saying one of my concerns with a hybrid event is the reduced physical attendance for the sake of cost savings. The benefits of being physically present are not clear to every manager. And I think there may be an issue with that, where you're cannibalizing your own attendance if you make the virtual too attractive, and part of the attractive is it just happens to be less expensive because there is no travel, there's no staying at a hotel, and all those kinds of things. So that's something that maybe local user groups don't have to think too much about, but because generally speaking, they're not doing any revenue associated with it anyway. But for a conference, that's something we really have to think about: is how do we make it pay? And I think what Jens is alluding to is there was a whole thread on Reddit which raised my blood pressure a lot, because I forced myself to not respond. But there's all these experts on how to run a conference. Just ask them. They know exactly how to run a conference and how much it should cost people. And I think maybe they know a little bit less about running an online conference than Jens does. But they don't seem to think that. They know exactly what it should cost. But that's
your point is very true.
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, I would love to find a solution that could have the better of both worlds, and I'm thinking about it. So yeah, that's an issue.
Well, from a technical point of view, this is actually very interesting because we will see what technologies like augmented reality and virtual reality will contribute to this problem. And then there are also already situations where children cannot attend the school, so they have a little robot with a display which shows their face and they can move around with this. So maybe we need to extend this idea a little bit. So, yeah.
So Gabriel's pointing out, Jon has also made it clear that conferences like CppCon are already extremely inclusive by posting all the videos for free on YouTube, making them globally available to everyone. And of course, this is CppCon, unlike some of the other conferences, is run by an organization that has a mission to evangelize quality C++. Of course, we run just like all the other conferences in the practical sense. I mean, we're doing the same thing they're doing. They're giving their videos away free. We're giving our videos away free. And part of the reason is there's two reasons to give video away free. The foundations, wants to evangelize good C++. But we also know, I'm pretty sure, I don't know how to measure it, but the best advertising for getting people to come to CppCon is showing them the videos and letting them realize this is what goes on at the conference. This is what you want to be part of. So even if that wasn't our goal to evangelize quality C++, it's probably the smart thing to do to give the videos away. I think there might be something even more compelling to get people to come to the conference, and that is let them do it at a virtual. In other words, if you're there and you're realizing, wow, there's all these really cool attendees that I kind of get to talk to on remote, but wouldn't it be so cool if I could do this without talking into a microphone, if it were just right there, right? So I think maybe the best ad is not going to be the videos anymore. The best ad is going to be to get somebody to come to the virtual conference and then make them realize, yeah, it's kind of expensive to go to the conference and stay there, but it very likely is going to be worthwhile. We don't know that yet. I mean, this is all new to everybody, but I kind of think that, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic, and maybe what will happen is if we do a hybrid conference, nobody will show up because everybody says, look how much money I can save if I just do it telecommuting. We'll find out.
Well,
I'm definitely going to come next year. I mean,
so there's the other side. Companies are looking for C++ developers, and it's highly sought for. And I know that a lot of my attendees are coming to the conference either for their team and to make the contacts and to just see certain talks. But on the other hand, I think it's also kind of a way of that a company is giving something extra to you, that you travel to Berlin or to Denver, and maybe I know a lot of people continuing their stay after Berlin or after CppCon with a holiday. So and yeah, being physically at the conference has definitely an advantage, and I do think that physical conferences will continue, but as a conference organizer, what I have to plan now for next year is like, how big is the conference next year? And I don't think it's going to be as big as the recent years. And that's where I see, for probably many of us, the biggest problem, that we have contracts and we now need to renegotiate those contracts as long as we can before that is locked in. And otherwise, all those organizations which are organizing those conferences could be in trouble next year for paying contracts or bound to contracts that are not feasible for being exercised in the reality.
This is my nightmare. We know that we can run a successful on-site conference in normal times. We've done that. We know that we can run a successful online conference. We're doing that right now. What terrifies me is what happens if the pandemic is partially dealt with, and we have a contract with the hotel. They let us out of it this year because of this, but next year they might say, look, we're starting to get back on our feet. You need to have the on-site. And then we end up in a situation where instead of getting the 1,000+ attendees that we expect, what if we only get a few hundred? And suddenly we have, as I say, we have expenses that we have commitments with the hotel in terms of how many rooms and all these kinds of things. This could be devastating for us. Of course, we're going to move forward. We're not going to let that paralyze us. But that's my nightmare, is that we can live in a pandemic. We certainly can live without a pandemic. What happens we're just recovering from a pandemic kind of situation. And who knows what the timing on that's going to be. So speaking of timing, we're kind of out. I will quickly touch on, there was a question about maybe combining different languages to maybe have some kind of mega conference. But my personal opinion is that C++ is deep enough that we don't need to throw in other languages to fill an entire week conference. So that's not what I want to go to. And Gabriel is saying, what's the best advice to someone who wants to create a user group, or someone who wants to volunteer to help an existing group? If you're wanting to help an existing group, nobody's going to say no to that. Contact whoever the leaders are of the existing group. There is a way of contacting them. Nobody hides their email. And if you want to start your own, then the starter kit is great. And if Jim wants to paste in that URL to the starter kit again in the chat channel, that would be absolutely terrific. We are out of time. I want to thank the panel, not just for being on the panel, but for doing what you're doing in the community, because this has been a really tough year. And for those of us that have stuck with it, we'll see the other side and we'll be stronger for it. But unfortunately, I think it's going to get harder before it gets easier. So thank you guys all very much. And thank you for attending. And for those of you in the audience that are running,
thank you, John.
Those of you who are running groups locally or thinking about running groups, contact any one of us here, and we're happy to encourage you. And as I said, look at the starter kit. There's lots of information and pointers about how you can contact people and get help. So thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you.